So we turn to the next verse. It turns out that the Qur'an just doesn't dismiss the question. It starts to answer it a little bit. And in the next verse it says, and he taught Adam, God taught Adam, the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. So this verse is clearly referring to the previous one. But notice what it says. Now, I from my own background, I remember Adam naming things. But it wasn't connected to any answer to any philosophical question. But here, notice what it says. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And I realized already, just from the first verse, you got to read these verses very carefully because it's packed with a lot of symbolism and meaning. And he taught Adam the names of all things. So here we see Adam is not only just a creature who knows how to name things, who's acquiring the gift of language, but he's also a learning creature. God is teaching him. Now right here, right in this verse, and it'll come even clearer in the subsequent verses, that the very first thing that the Qur'an is going to emphasize here is man's intellect. He is a learning creature. He is taught. And what is he taught? What is one of the great intellectual gifts he's given in response to the angel's question? The gift of language. Because through language, mankind can not only learn, but he could learn things not only through his own experience, but he could learn things that other people have experienced of times and places that are hundreds, thousands of years and miles separated from him. And so that all our knowledge becomes cumulative. Every generation learning from the generation before it. I'm learning today from authors I read from other sides of the world that may have existed 2,000 years ago. And so we all contribute to our collective learning and knowledge. And so I'll see later in the Qur'an, when the Qur'an will emphasize this again and again and again. Like in one verse it says, read in the name of your Lord who created. Created a man out of a tiny creature that clings. Read, it commands the reader. For your Lord is most bountiful. Why is he most bountiful? What great gift did he give you? For he taught man the use of the pen. And through it taught him what he otherwise could not know. And time again, the Qur'an will call upon man to use his intellectual faculties and swear by his intellectual faculties. And to use them correctly because they play a fundamental role in guiding him to truth. I never came upon a scripture that puts so much emphasis on the correct use of our intellectual faculties, on the harnessing of reason, in helping us attain to faith. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. Okay, you have this objection, you have this natural question about this creation of mankind. Here, this mankind is this human being, this human creature is a learning creature. He has many intellectual gifts. Here, I'm going to place these things before you. Tell me their names if you are right about man. And what did the angels say? In the next verse they say, glory to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. They say this task, this intellectual test that's put before them is beyond their grasp. Notice what they emphasize. We have no knowledge. This would take knowledge. This would take an intellect that they don't possess. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. You got it. It's easy for you. You're the knowing, the wise. You have knowledge. You have wisdom. But this would take knowledge and wisdom that is beyond us. And so in the next verse we read, and he said, "O Adam, tell them their names." And when he had told them their names, notice how it's just like it's nothing for him. For mankind, he has this phenomenal ability. And when he had told them their names, as if it's just a triviality for man, he names them. "O Adam, tell them their names." And when he had told them their names, God said, "Did I not tell you that I know what is unseen in the heavens and the earth? And I know what you reveal and conceal?" And he's clearly going back to the angel's question. Yes, you have these natural concerns about the creation of mankind. Yes, he could do these evil things. But look at this tremendous intellect he has. This is something you have overlooked that you haven't considered. And that's clearly the point of these verses. Even though I felt that the author didn't quite, it was as if I realized that he didn't misunderstand the story. He was taking one of the great stories in the history of humankind, one of the fundamental greatest stories in the history of mankind, and molding it and using it as a vehicle for an entirely original message. And God said, "Did I not tell you that I know what is unseen in the heavens and the earth? And I know what you reveal and what you conceal?" In other words, didn't I tell you I know exactly what I'm doing? And then in the next, and didn't I not tell you that I know what you reveal and conceal? I looked at that. What question what did they reveal and what did they conceal? What did their question reveal and conceal? I thought about it for a minute. Oh, it's obvious. What did their question reveal? You just go back and look at the question. It revealed the sinful and sinister propensities of man. I mean, it's obvious, right? Why are you all looking at me like that? You're starting to scare me. You're all looking very serious. Am I losing you? Wow. Okay. So, they revealed the sinister and evil propensities of man. But what did their question conceal? And all you have to do is think about it for a minute. Human beings, yes, they could do evil. Yes, they could do wrong. Yes, they could create misery. But they could also do exactly the opposite. They could choose to do evil. They could choose to do tremendous good. They could choose to do tremendous violence. They could choose to show tremendous compassion. They could choose to live by falsehood. They could choose to live by the greatest truths. They could be terribly ugly. They could be terribly beautiful. And up until that point in my life, I, like the angels, that only saw one side of the coin. For the first time when I read that verse, believe it or not, it was an eye-opener for me. I had always been obsessed with the evil potentials of human beings. When I read that verse, I realized that, and I had a great example right in front of me with my own mom, I realized that I had been blinded by only one side of human nature. So we go on to the next verse. "And behold, we said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they bowed down. But not so Iblis." Iblis is like the father of Satan. Satans, satanic beings, forces, creatures, existences. "He refused and was arrogant. He was of those who reject faith." An interesting statement. "And behold, we said to the angels, bow down to Adam. And they bowed down." Bowing down could symbolize two things. Bowing down could symbolize the superiority or potential superiority of one being over another, and so they bowed down to them. Bowing down could also mean that they serve that creature in some respect. Of course, the Qur'an says that all beings serve God, all created beings serve God. But this verse seems to be indicating, and the rest of the Qur'an will make it clear, that these angelic beings, these angelic entities, will serve the development of mankind. We'll even see later that the satanic beings serve the development of mankind. Both forces, angelic and satanic, will serve the development of mankind. Because one will present man with a choice to do the most altruistic things. The other will simultaneously try to influence man in the opposite direction. And so human beings will be moral creatures, and will have to make moral decisions. And it's in those moral decisions that they will grow spiritually and morally as human beings. And they'll take that into the next life. And the angelic and the satanic forces will be catalysts for those moral choices that they make. They will heighten the human being's awareness of the rightfulness and the wrongfulness of the choice he's about to make. And the self, the soul, the nafs, as they say in Arabic, will have to make the ultimate choice between good and evil. And that choice, that test will come again and again and again as human beings either grow or decline. And those tests will come again and again and again to try to help him towards his spiritual evolution, to bring him back. But that choice is ultimately ours. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And so we said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they bowed down. But not so Iblis. Iblis is Satan, this rebellious force, this evil prompter, the one who whispers into the human heart. He comes into being. And with the introduction of Satan, we have the introduction of evil, that evil influences on human beings. And notice why Iblis does not bow down. He refuses because he was arrogant. You know, we often hear what's the root of all evil? In the West, it's always money, greed, etc. Here the Qur'an seems to be saying that the root of all evil is not always material wants. It's not always money, it's not always greed. At the heart of evil is arrogance, putting yourself above all others, of assigning to yourself special priority and neglecting the rights of others, of pride and arrogance and envy, the source of evil. He was of those who reject faith. I looked at that verse and I said, okay, I get why you would create angels to sort of influence man in a positive direction. But why in this story now are you introducing Satan? What sort of role was Satan play? And then, of course, you just think about it for a minute and you say, yes. The story is telling us that on one hand, we have these magnanimous urgings come from one direction. On the other hand, we have these satanic urgings coming from another direction. In other words, the Quran is telling us that man is not only a learning creature, but he's a moral creature. He has understanding of right and wrong. And God infuses those, allows those influences to come to him. Man is not only an intelligent being, but a moral being. And so, the Quran is not all that difficult to understand. You just sort of read it, I found, and you just sort of follow your nose through it and see what it's saying. I'm sure, as most of you in this audience know. Okay, so we see that man is not only a learning creature, but he is a moral being as well. There's another verse in the Quran that says, by the soul and that which whispers into it, or which breathes into it. It's morality, it's immorality, and it's God consciousness. Both of these we are under the influence of. And God allows us to be under the influences of. He creates us to be exposed to both influences. And then the verse says, truly he is successful, who causes it to grow. Causes his soul, his self, his real self to grow. And truly he is lost, who stunts it, who disallows, who destroys his personal growth. So mankind is not only an intellectual being, but a moral being. And we said in the next verse, O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish, and eat freely thereof what you wish. But come not near this tree, for then you will be among the wrongdoers. I looked at this verse and I was, starting to wonder if the author was drifting back to the old story again. I was confused. And we said, O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish, but come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers. I thought it was drifting back to the old story. Man sins, man's punished for his sins with earthly life. Maybe the author is drifting, he had a good idea, and now he's drifting back to the sort of traditional story. Maybe he couldn't make his mind up what story he wanted. Except for a couple things about this verse, and this happened with almost every verse as I read through it, is that the whole tenor of the passage is sort of not what you would expect. I noticed that the Quran in this story has a tremendous penchant for understating things. Because it says, and said to Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish, to Adam and his spouse. But come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers. There's no sense of God being threatened by the possibility of man eating from the tree. In this story, we don't see in this verse, we don't see that God is nervous at the prospect, that he's threatened by the prospect, that he's anxious about it. The tree that he picks, it seems like he's just picking out any tree. Nothing special about the tree. Go not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers. Satan will later come to him and tell him it's a tree of eternal life, of a kingdom that never decays. Turns out to be a complete falsehood in his part. Nothing special about the tree. It's just a tree. God's not nervous at the prospect at all. In the tradition that I came from, God is threatened by the prospect. He has to put an angel with a fiery sword by to protect the tree so that mankind never goes next to it again. I'm not putting it down. I'm just pointing out the difference of the story. They're both beautifully told. But he has to guard the tree. Why? Because if they eat from it, They will become gods like us. This man, he already has a rebellious nature. Can you imagine if he eats from this tree? I don't know. Can't let him get near that tree. But here, just, calmly says, but if you do, you will be among the wrongdoers. God is not worried about himself. It's just warning man, making it clear that if you do this, you've committed a wrongful deed. Again, the whole tenor of all these verses that you read through it is God knows exactly what he's doing. Okay, next verse. But Satan caused them to slip and expelled them from the state in which they were. And we said, go you all down, some of you being the enemies of others, and on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. What? I said? I was expecting now the rage, the anger, the violence, the jealousy. That's what I was expecting. Okay, they eat from the tree. Where's the rage, the violence? I'm going to punish you now. You're going to sweat on earth. And you're going to suffer, and you're going to stub your toe, and you're going to work, and you're going to labor. And you're going to die there for what you did. And where's the woman? All right? And the woman, right? She's the one who's going to suffer the most, right? She'll have to suffer labor pains and monthly cycles, right? And bleeding and crying out when her children come into the world. And she'll scream out. And worst of all, the greatest humiliation, the man will rule over her. When he's obviously her intellectual inferior, because she and the angels she and Satan seduced him, and he just bumbled along and committed a wrong deed. Well, I don't mean to make light of it, but the story is obviously different, though. No threat here. As a matter of fact, look at the way it says, "O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish. But come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers." Then they make the mistake. But Satan caused them to slip and expelled them from the state in which they were. And we said, go all you down, some of you being enemies of others, will be adversaries of others. Some of you will be adversaries of each other, and on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. This is not a deity losing it. If you look at it, on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. That's not the words of a God that is lost, that is really extremely upset. On earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. When I walked into the hotel today, and they said, and it's this nice one up here, I don't know the name, I can't remember the name of it, but it has a continental breakfast. And they said, your room will be room 111, and there's a continental breakfast in the morning. I didn't say, I didn't think they were mad at me. Because they said, you're going to sleep here, and this is going to be your provision in the morning. Oh, thank you. But notice something else about this verse. When you read these verses for the first time, I don't know, maybe I'm nuts, and many people think I am. But when you read these verses for the first time, this is just so much that catches your attention. But Satan caused them to slip. Remember, I couldn't get that verse those words out of my head. Satan caused them to slip. To slip? The greatest sin in the history of the human race, and it's called a slip? In my culture, slip means, you just momentarily, for a fraction of a second, you lose your focus. It's not a big deal. My Uncle Bob used to always say to me, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, I slipped up. The understanding is it's no big deal. It's just a slip. That's what we say when we make a minor mistake. I slipped up. Don't worry about it. Never happen again. A slip, I said? Momentary loss of focus? The greatest sin in the history of humanity? Why we're all here? Why we're all suffering? Why we experience death? A slip? I didn't believe it. I went to my Arabian friends at that time. I didn't know any Arabic. I came to this verse. We went through it line by line. I said, now don't change any words. Just read them one at a time. But Satan made them, and I said, okay, this one right here. What does it mean? Tell me what that means. They looked at it, it says, slip. Slip. And expelled them from the state in which they were. A slip, I thought? But then maybe I was trying to force the traditional understanding, the traditional interpretation. Maybe it was just a slip. I mean, after all, they didn't commit murder. They didn't commit robbery, rape, pillaging, assault. They ate a couple of pieces of fruit. It's not the greatest sin in the history of humanity by any means. And then the next verse says, and then they were expelled from the state in which they were. Well, what state were they? Let's see now. Let's go back from where we started. First, mankind is being taught. We see he's an intellectual being. Then we show he's a moral being. Moral being means he's a being that's going to have to make choices. And then God gives him this choice. It's not a huge deal. It's not the gravest sin in the history of humanity by any means. It's minor by any standards. They make it, though. We see that God originally intended to put man on earth as his vicegerent. We see a period of preparation where he's being prepared intellectually, where he's growing as a moral creature. When does God finally put him on earth? What signals that he's ready to begin? He makes his first independent choice. It's not the worst deed in the history of humanity. It's minor on anybody's scale, but it shows that mankind is ready to act on his own, to be his own, to make his own choices, that God has empowered him to make choices, and he's ready to make them and carry them out, and see them most often to their expected ends, if God wills. And that seems to be the only real significance of it. But I thought, maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe God just blows off into an angry rampage the next verse. So I look at the next one and it says, and then Adam received words from his Lord. And God turned to him mercifully, for he's oft returning, ever merciful. Well, if I had any doubts up till now that God is not enraged by what this has happened, that God hasn't prepared mankind for this choice, for what was eventually going to happen, that all this was preparation for mankind to begin his earthly sojourn in this famous allegory. If I had any doubts before now, I had them, certainly didn't have them after reading this verse. This verse is entirely consoling, reaching and merciful, reaching out to mankind in mercy. Mankind goes to earth. He's obviously afraid. He obviously feels remorse. He's in an unfamiliar environment. And what does God do? He turns to him. He turns to him. In Arabic, the word has the meaning of like a father turning towards an infant or a child or somebody, or a parent, a mother turning towards her child. And he turns to him mercifully, and for God is oft returning, ever merciful. And Adam receives words from his Lord. What kind of words? Probably words of consolation, words of hope, words tell him not to be scared. And in the next verse, we see those are exactly the type of words that Adam receives. He says, go down, Adam and his spouse. Go down from this state, all of you together. Repeating that again, just so that we know that this is not a punishment here. Go down from this state, all of you together, and truly there will come to you guidance from me. And whoever follows my guidance has nothing to fear, nor shall they grieve. It is an emotional picture. This young couple is here, in fear and in shame, feeling remorse, and God reaches out to them and turns towards them and tells them, you have nothing to fear, nor shall you grieve. I know this is tough for you, but you've been prepared for it up till now, through your entire existence. It had to happen. This is a necessary stage in your development, in your growth, but just hang in there, follow my guidance, be true to me and I'll be true to you. I'll guide you, I'll help you, I'll do whatever you need. Just follow my guidance and you have nothing to fear, nor shall you grieve. Okay. So I was impressed. I thought this author, whom I didn't know, I thought was extremely brilliant. Because the story is entirely coherent, but it's bringing out entirely new meaning. And it's stressing some things in the human equation that I would never have normally thought of. Actually, I thought these sort of things argued against the existence of God. Here, the author was using them to say, look at these. These play a fundamental role in the purpose of life. What? Intellect. Human beings have intellect. Right? In response to the angel's question, they are moral creatures, and they are subjected to evil and angelic promptings, and they have to choose between them again and again and again throughout their existence, and their growth, which the Qur'an talks about frequently, is going to depend on that. We're here to grow, as we will see, but it emphasizes choice. Human beings are creatures of choice. It also emphasizes suffering. Suffering. Hey, that's pretty nice writing. It also emphasizes suffering. Human beings are going to suffer here on earth. That's the first thing that the story mentions. Spread corruption and shed blood? Havoc, suffering, pain? Yes, these three things play essential roles somehow, the story is saying, in our development on earth, in our very purpose of our development. These are the three things we've always had the most trouble grappling with, all theologies have. Why give us intellect? If it leads us often to challenge in our minds the existence of God, if we can't reconcile the existence of God with our minds, with our reason, why give us choice if we could choose to do wrong? Just make us angels. Why let us suffer so on earth? Just pop us into heaven. And here the Qur'an is telling that these play essential roles in our attaining of faith. Not only these, of course, it also mentions guidance, God's forgiveness, revelation, etc., angelic forces, satanic temptation. It mentions all these other things as well, but these three essentially really caught my attention. I never expected that these three things would be emphasized. And so as I read through the Qur'an, I looked, anytime I saw anything that seemed to relate to this, I would write down notes and underline it. You know, and I would walk up and down in San Francisco with my pen as I'm walking, because I like to walk about 7 miles every day, and I'd be underlining. My friends would always say, "Jeff, what book are you reading?" And I would lie to them. I'd tell them, "Oh, it's a great novel or something." You know, I didn't want them to know that I was reading the Qur'an. I think they thought I was going nuts. But in any case, so very quickly, I was wondering, does the Qur'an really emphasize reason? Does it really emphasize choice? Does it really emphasize suffering? How much more time do I have, Madam Speaker? 35? 25, okay. I'll do the best I can. So let me just try to indicate to you, as I read through the Qur'an, and I'll try to get through this quickly because you guys look tired. And I know you're interested to find out how that basketball game is turning out. Let's see, does the Qur'an really emphasize reason as essential to human growth, to this experience we're having on earth, to our very purpose? And the answer is definitely yes. So much so that even Western Orientalists, people who wrote against the Qur'an, said that this is a major feature of the Qur'an, a feature that you cannot miss. Henri Lemens, writing in the early part of this century, one of the famous Orientalists, who wrote very much against Muslims, hoping to unseat them from their religious belief. He wrote, "The Qur'an," and this is his quote, "is not far from considering unbelief as an infirmity of the human mind." Unbelief is, he thought, and he was saying it mockingly, is like, you can't think straight. You're not using your mind right, as my father used to say. Maxime Rodinson wrote at length about the rationalistic approach of the Qur'an to faith. And this rational tone of the Qur'an is one of its most salient features, beyond doubt. I'll just give you a few quotations. One of its fundamental themes is that people ignore or reject God's signs and corrupt religion precisely because they do not use their reason. And the Qur'an will say that again and again and again. The Qur'an says about the disbelievers, they refuse to reason and are a people who do not reason. I have 7 such quotes in the Qur'an. The Qur'an will say, "Will you not reason?" It mentions that 14 times to the reader. God reveals signs and lessons and admonitions so that, and this is a quote from the Qur'an, perhaps you will finally use your reason. There are 8 such statements in the Qur'an. From the Qur'an's viewpoint, reason and faith are allies, just as illogic and false belief are allies. And it clearly sets the conflict along these lines. It says the right way has henceforth become clear from error. Those who benefit most from the Qur'an are persons of insight. 16 such statements in the Qur'an. Firmly rooted in knowledge, 8 such statements. Use the reason. 10 such statements. Stand on clear evidence and proof, 7 such statements. Those who oppose this revelation are deluded, 9 such statements. In manifest error, 28 such statements. Ignorant, 15. Foolish, 3. Have no understanding, 9. Only follow surmise and conjecture, 9. And blindly adhere to tradition, multiple times. It states that. In an almost Socratic style, the Qur'an repeatedly quizzes the reader and calls into question his or her assumptions. Again and again, it asks us, what do you think? 18 such statements. Have you considered this or that? 13. Did you suppose? 7. Sounds like a math teacher. Do they not ponder? 2 such statements. Do you think? Do you even think? 18 such statements. The message is clear. To gain truer faith, we need to free ourselves from inherited notions and examine our beliefs rationally. Learning plays a key role in human development. Read, the Qur'an exhorts the reader. For God taught us the use of the pen and taught humankind what it otherwise could not know. In life, nature, and history, in the Qur'an, there are signs and lessons for those who are wise. There are 21 such statements. The Qur'an states over 100 times that it has been revealed to make things clear. I thought the author of this Qur'an must have had strong mathematical insight, a natural mathematician. All throughout, when I was reading, I was trying to imagine what he must have been like. God teaches humanity both directly and indirectly, and sometimes so subtly that we are unaware of his instruction. Thus, he tests us in multifarious ways. Of course, I just want to make it clear, Muslims believe God himself is the author of the Qur'an. Sometimes I give this speech and people come away and ask me, Jeff, who is the author of the Qur'an anyway? But I didn't know. So I was just trying to figure it out. Repetition is indicative of the importance given to certain ideas. It should be observed that the Arabic word for knowledge in the Qur'an, ilm, appears 854 times in the text in its various forms. It's one of the most frequently occurring words. So the Qur'an really does put great emphasis on reason in our spiritual quest. Does it put great emphasis on choice? Well, here's what it has to say. Let there be no compulsion in religion. The right way is henceforth clear from error. It's a choice, and it must be freely made. And it's a choice between correctness and error, between right and error, between reason and falsity. Had God willed, he could have indeed guided you all, it says in the Qur'an. Why not, I thought. Why not just guide us all? Why let some of us choose to go this way and that way? The Qur'an is constantly provoking me as I read it. Do not the unbelievers know that had God willed, he could have guided all mankind? Oh, do not the believers know that had God willed, he could have guided all mankind? Okay, I'm an unbeliever, I thought. Tell me, why didn't you guide all mankind? If you want us to be in conformity of your will, just make us that way. And if we had so willed, we could have given every soul its guidance. Why did you let us be creatures of choice? Just program us to do the right thing. Never make a wrong choice. Had God willed, he could have made us all one community. He could have made us clones of one another. But he didn't. It wasn't part of his plan. Enlightenment has come from your Lord. He who sees does so to his own good. He who is blind is so to his own hurt. It's your choice. It says it again and again in the Qur'an. Remember when I was reading this, I was a disbeliever. And this scripture is constantly reminding me, it's your choice, Jeff. It's no compulsion in this. It's your choice. It's up to you. You're probably not reasoning correctly here. Think a little harder. Come on, try. It's just a few more steps.